The Application Lifecycle Risk Management Podcast, Episode 24, Selenium Performance Improvements. As many of you know, I've been using Selenium to do my website testing. And if you've done any testing with Selenium yourself, you know that Selenium can be even slower if you're using Selenium Grid. Today I want to talk to you about ways you might be able to increase the performance of your test. The cache lookup attribute, or annotation if you're using Java. This is probably the most obvious place for improvement. Assuming you are using the page model pattern in your testing, your page model should have properties that already look something like an attribute with finds by over the property. What you may not know is that the way this works is that every time you access the property named radio button, it will look up the location of the radio button. The radio button property is actually a proxy for the real iWeb element that will be looked up on the fly. So, if you're using the element more than once in your test, it will perform the lookup each time you access the radio button property. By adding the cache lookup attribute to the radio button property, you can force the radio button to be resolved once and only once. Most of my tests ask for elements once per test, so I didn't see any major performance gains by adding this. Your mileage may vary. Now there's a warning for cache lookup. Be careful when adding this to your properties because anytime the HTML is recreated, the element will become stale and you'll need to look it up again. For example, in one of the pages I'm testing, I have two modal windows that get created as part of the test. Each time they are created, they have to be resolved again because the old ones no longer exist. It would be like trying to reference a pointer to an object that no longer exists because something else deleted it. Oh, wait, that's actually what's happening. Now, cache lookup only solves one of your problems. If all you do on your site is add cache lookup, you're probably wasting your time. You have to start thinking like your code. Did you know that every time you access a property on an iWeb element, Selenium has to make a call to the browser to access the current value? Yep. Actually, if you think about it, this is what you hope it does. It is what makes code like wait until work. But how many times do we write code that goes after a property multiple times when we know the value, or at least we assume the value hasn't changed? Or how many of you are doing the same thing multiple times in the same test? For example, in the code I'm testing currently, I have a header and a footer that need to be hid so that when an element is scrolled into view by Selenium, it doesn't scroll under the header or the footer. That prevents me from clicking the element. I'm currently hiding and showing every time I perform some action on an element. But now that I'm starting to think about performance, I'm asking myself, what was I thinking? In this case, I would save a lot of time by turning the header off once at the beginning of my test. I bet my test end up running twice as fast simply by doing that. So keep in mind that every Selenium call you make is probably going to have to access the server in order to perform the action or retrieve the value you're looking for. And try to write your code so that you're only making that call to the server one time per test. I bet you see some performance improvements. For the links to items mentioned in this podcast, make sure you check out my blog at blog.dmbcllc.com. A link to this article is in the show description.